I ended the last video by saying Kafka was a bureaucratic hero. Now, there are some people who believe the phrase bureaucratic hero is an oxymoron. Those words just don't belong together. There is no such thing as a bureaucratic hero. I can answer that claim in 2 words: Franz Kafka. If Kafka had never written a word, he would still deserve our admiration for his pioneering work in one of the first government bureaucracies in the world. In order to explain to you what he did, I have to give you a little bit of history. Bureaucracies dominate our lives today. It's hard to imagine. A couple 300 years ago, they were virtually unknown. Bureaucracies first developed in business organizations and only later in government. In 1776, a guy named Adam Smith wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, where he described this new kind of business organization, based first of all on division of labor, and then on hierarchical structure and administrative rules. In these new kinds of organizations, workers were just factors of production, like equipment. They'd use you till you got disabled or wore out or whatever, then they'd just replace you. Obviously, this kind of a system can be very brutal. You know who this is? No, it's not Santa Claus as a younger man. It's Karl Marx. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of international communism. Marx wrote that in the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Now, Marx was wrong about some things, but he was right about that. The capitalism of the day was brutal, and a lot of people were listening to the communists' rhetoric about workers rising up and seizing the means of production. Of course, the factory owners would say, we don't treat workers like mere factors of production. Worker welfare is our #1 priority. Ho, ho, ho! So what's the solution? Enlightened governments began to set up institutes to promote safe workplace practices and to take care of disabled workers. In 1887, the King of Bohemia, by royal decree, established the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. These kinds of institutes were established all over Europe by monarchies. Now, America at the time was a democracy, so we were probably ahead of the Europeans in workplace safety regulations, right? Wrong. A number of states tried to enact such legislation, but the Supreme Court kept striking them down. Finally, in 1911, Wisconsin passed a law that the Supreme Court said was constitutional, and many other states followed suit very soon after. Anyway, government bureaucracies began to emerge around this time, and they borrowed some of the features of business bureaucracy. One of the first academics to write about bureaucracy was Max Weber. Now, you probably never heard of this guy, but there are a lot of people who consider him to be the father of sociology. He studied the emergence of modern bureaucracies that Kafka experienced firsthand. Weber described how bureaucracies function. Kafka described what it was like to work and live in them. Weber formally defined bureaucracies. Kafka expressed the feelings of those affected by them. Now, Weber laid out 6 characteristics that all bureaucracies should have ideally. He called this an ideal type. First, a formal hierarchical structure. Each level controls the level below it, and this is the basis for centralized planning and decision-making. The second feature is management by rules. Once rules are designed and approved at the higher levels, they must be followed consistently by all those at the lower levels. Third, organization by functional specialty. Bureaucracies are specialists, and they're grouped into units according to the work they do and the skills they have. A clearly defined mission. You can't just say, well, we all sort of agree what the organization's supposed to do. It must be clearly and explicitly defined. The 5th feature of bureaucracies is that they are intentionally impersonal. All employees and all customers are treated equally. And finally, employment is based on technical qualifications, not political affiliation or other factors. And often there are exams to test your technical qualifications required by these bureaucracies. These 6 characteristics are all good principles for organizing collective action. Bureaucracies aren't evil. behave in frustrating and Kafkaesque ways, it's often because they are not following these principles. Alternative is for a strong leader, say Trump, to manage according to his own insights, instincts, and whims. A great leader like this despises and ignores bureaucracy. Well, we've had a couple of decades or a couple of years of the Trump presidency, and we can see where this approach has led us. There is an alternative approach, which is to try to reform and improve bureaucracies. And you begin by hiring competent, compassionate people like Kafka. And then when they do their jobs exceptionally well, you acknowledge that. I look forward to the day when bureaucracy will not be a dirty word, and when the concept of bureaucratic heroes will not sound like an oxymoron.